So let's get started down this set of notes. We've talked about we kind of ended talking last time about some of the issues that face the idea of revitalizing church leadership and trying to adapt it to we're on the first page of that second handout, of the handout I sent last week. I guess let me ask, do you all need me to resend it to you? Because I can send it to you pretty quick if that's what you need. If you need it, someone put it, if you're needing it, send it, tell me, and I'll send it to you real quick by email. It'll be by email, guys. All right, it seems like I'm not seeing anybody come back asking for it. So I will assume we've got it unless someone comes up pretty quick and says they need it. All right. So we're going to go back and take probably just this week only, and we're going to look at just the model that brought us into the New Testament with using Old Testament leadership and how that worked. So we start with the various different positions in Old Testament, and those are going to be kings, judges, and prophets. Those three were the three leadership positions that initially were in the Old Testament structure. So we talk about kings, and we're going to talk about the relationship with those two New Testament structures. So one of those things is that, that we would say Jesus is king. Jesus is the one that replaced that. But we also believe he takes on a deeper meaning because he also became the head of the church, which has a much deeper organizational or a much deeper connection because he's the head of a body, not just a figurative king out there to lead. So, and if you all remember your I will, okay, give me a second and let me drop that in all right, hang on.
This break brought to you by the King of Kings. Okay.
Okay, so that should be in the BICM for you all. And let me send it on to Sikander. Hang on. All right, so I send it to Sikander by email, and I dropped it in the BICM chat for you guys. All right. Okay.
All right.
So you should have it now. All right, let's. So I'll give you all a moment to get it pulled up, and then I will let me know when you get it. If you.
Okay.
Luke, do you have it already?
Just 1 second, I will download the file.
All right, so Sikander's got it. How about Luke? Do you all have it in BICM?
The Old
I have it
Testament,
here.
BM 521.
Yeah, just so you hang on to that. That's what I'm looking at. We'll start down that. How about the guys in the Philippines? Do you all have it?
Yeah.
Not yet, sir. I will get it right now.
All right, so it should be coming to you. I sent it by now if you want me to send it by email, I can do that, but I sent it by messenger by BICM.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, you can talk about for Jesus is the King, and I listen here, and you also send us our teachings.
All right.
Thank
So
you so. Thank you.
you're welcome. I'm waiting on the other guys to be able to open it. So hang on.
Wayne,
Is it already posted, sir, in the group? Or not yet?
I posted it and sent it. Yes.
Wayne,
Yes.
I can
you,
view it
go ahead, Doc.
right now.
Yes, Dong. What were you saying?
Did you intentionally shut off your video?
No. Yeah. I guess I didn't mean to. Let's see there. I turned it back on again. I didn't know it was off, but it's on now. Can you all see me
Okay.
now? All right.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. So do you all have it now,
Let's
Luke?
go.
You got it? All right. So you've now got it. So we'll move on a little more now. All right. And we're only going to talk about some of this briefly, guys, not in great detail. So the models we have in the Old Testament would be king, would be the first one we'll talk about, and king, not that that's in order either, but because judges came before kings, but we see Jesus is the only one in the church. But if you remember rightly, if you go back and you look at 1 Samuel chapter 8, God did not want to give them kings. God wanted to keep the judges in place. He wanted to use them, not put in an earthly structure of kingship, but God knew what would happen. They become powerful, and then they become corrupt, and then after that, it would, they became the downfall to some degree of Israel after that point in time, just because of their their inability to. And I'm not here to teach a course on Old Testament history, but I think we all know that the kings in the Old Testament, there'd be one that would be faithful to God, and then they'd fall away again, and they'd rebuild the idols and put the places on the high places, and then they'd end up back in trouble again, and then they'd find a king who'd follow Jesus or follow God's law, and then they turn around and fall away again. I mean, so it was just a continual cycle, and really, David had his faults, but David was probably one that was the most loyal of any of them in terms of their ability to hold on to the Mosaic law. Jesus is king and within the will of God and is incorruptible. So let's talk about prophets for a minute. There's the Old Testament is full of prophets, and folks, what did the prophets primarily do in the Old Testament? What was their role in the Old Testament? Someone give me a quick answer.
Mediator.
Pardon, Jovan, say it again.
Mediator.
Mediator.
Proclaimer.
Yes.
Proclaimer of what God had said to the people.
Yep. And you're right, Abel. You said rebuke. They were there. So they didn't. They had you can take Samuel, and Samuel played a role in terms of his role of but he was a priest. He wasn't necessarily a prophet. He came up under and became a became a priest, and then eventually was the one that ordained both Saul and David. But then there was a whole slew of prophets that came after that, and the primary motivation between was to give the message of God, whether it was a rebuke, whether it was a positive piece. But he did, that was his role, was to proclaim that message, whatever it was. No particular social levels. They came from many different social levels. And some of them wrote and some of them didn't. You know, we have their written, we have the stories, but some of them were written by them, and some of them were written by other people that captured their stories during their time of their work. And I guess when it said, as we kind of alluded to a minute ago, their message was about, you know, some of you said rebuke, some of the proclaiming of God's word. You know, they were there to try to get the people to primarily come back around to God's will. Well, in the end, it never really, you know, it was only temporary fix, because the full fix didn't come till the New Testament and Christ came along. And they at times did bring comfort after defeat, even, you know, because they were even there as prophets after they were carried out into exile. So let's talk about Judges. Judges may be the one that we don't talk a whole lot about, but they were there. And their role was fairly specific in terms of you know, this was they really wanted a judge to be there to maintain keep the laws moving, to abide by those, and keep the people focused. And they came in response to, or to bring repentance in times of difficulty. And again, they just brought very much temporary relief. Probably one of the most, you know, we think of judges in terms of probably one of the most famous one was a female, you know, was Deborah and her work. Gideon kind of fell into that role too. So I mean, those all were people that we can see in those roles. And so when we talk about each of these, you know, when we look at Judges, we can see that some say there's a parallel between the Judges and the apostles, you know, and whether that's true or not, you know, we don't have any direct, you know, evidence of that, but some do say that would be the case. So let's talk a little bit about Old Testament elders. And obviously they have a little different role than what we have in the church today, but they were there. But we can see the parallels and the similarities between the Old Testament elders and their in that background for the New Testament. We know there was widespread rule by elders existed in the Near East. They were mentioned 100 times in the Old Testament. But the one thing we don't have is a detailed description of how they organized, how they were chosen, and even if they had some form of qualifications. We do not have any of that information based upon the Old Testament, maybe with the way they were put into place. The word in Hebrew for elder means an old man. So this could have meant either an old man in terms of wisdom and maturity, or it could be an old man in terms of age. We don't know the qualifications of whether or not they had a certain age they had to have in order to be able to become an elder in Old Testament times. But we do know that the father was almost the absolute ruler of the home in that society. They were then looked to for leadership, and they became. And I would agree, Dong, they were well experienced people. That's very true. They were very well experienced people. They became leaders of the clans and then the tribes. So there was definitely a way in which, like you said, Dong, that they were experienced and they knew they had the ability somehow to use that experience, and that experience was accepted by the people as a form of leadership. And I guess, and I don't want to spend a long time on this, but let's think a minute about about Ruth. You know, when Boaz went where? He went to the elders of the city to make his claim that he wasn't the first one in line to claim Ruth as, but another man was. So he went to the elders of the city to show that he wanted Ruth to be his wife, and to remove that from some other. Yes, the two Greek terms talk about older in age and spiritually mature. Yes, that's correct. So I'm definitely not a Hebrew student at all. So we've got to deal with the issues around Hebrew wording, but it definitely looks like it could have meant older leading men is how they looked at it. But Ruth's group, he went to the elders of the city to make his claim, and it became a legal proceeding, if you remember the story. So they look for, again, like we said, the ones with age so much is not a defining quality, but no one without maturity and experience and community recognition would not have been involved in that, would have been accepted in that, kind of like what you were saying, Dong, with the idea behind a person that would be an experienced person in that role. You know, I don't want to get off on the Levirate piece, but you know, they did have, the only other place we have for an age limitation would have been in a Levirate role, you know, a Levite role in terms of the priest had a role there. There isn't really a mention of elders prior to Moses, except there's a mention of elders in Pharaoh's house, and that's the only mention we have prior to that. We find in Exodus 3. Let's look there for a second. Exodus 3, so we know that when, you know, Moses went to the bulrushes, was born, went to the bulrushes, came in, became a part of Pharaoh's house, eventually left and went to Midian. And when God called him at the burning bush to return, he went back to Israel in Egypt and said, I've come to bring you out of bondage, out of slavery. But he went to the elders of the people, because it says there in Exodus 3, verse 16, go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I am indeed concerned about you and what has been done to you in Egypt. So we know that there is an elder type structure within the body of Israelites while they were in bondage there in Egypt itself. They served as representatives between Pharaoh and Exodus 29. So if we go over there for a second, 29 verse 31. Oh, that one doesn't pan out. I don't know. I'll have to look into that one. All right. But the mention of these rulers over the people and the first use of the word to appeared in Numbers 11, we find them that they chose people to be their rulers and formalize those relationships. And this role of leadership continued even up under Joshua and included political and military and spiritual authority. In other words, they had the authority to control those things, and they involved every aspect of society. And I think one thing we can draw from them is that they had some failures. And what were those failures that we can use in today? One was, if you look, if you look at those couple passages, they were warned that they should read the scriptures every so often over a span of time to the people, because we get to the point where we realize it's easy for us because we just pull up our Bibles, but they didn't have those in front of them. So they were given the in Deuteronomy 28, they were giving the command, I think it was every 7 years, to read the scripture before the people. And one of the things was they found they didn't do it. So that's what 1 Samuel points out. They had superstitions and things like that that interfered with them. They had failure to understand the idea of a theocracy. In other words, God didn't want the king to come in, but they failed to understand what his goal was by using the judges as a form of leadership, and they demanded a king, and they rejected both the cautions of Samuel and God to keep a king, but the elders kept pushing and saying, we want a king, we want a king. And the people were pushing them too. It's not that it was just elders, but the elders were being pushed by the people to have the king. And then at times they were just lacked the faithfulness to continue to hold true to God. And if we look at that throughout the Old Testament, that seems to be the common theme. Is like I said a little while ago, they get a king who demands something, and then they would they demand something, and then they would they demand the people come back around and be a part of the to obtain and adhere to God's laws, but then the next king would fall away, and the elders would never come back in and say, no, we need to hold on to the laws of Moses and continue that way. So they were swayed by the times of the day, even as we are today at times. So, and I'm not going to dig into these directly, but we find that under Saul's rule was brought on by a failure of the elders. Saul was concerned for his reputation by the elders, so he sought their support as elders and then found their and made a covenant with them to secure their loyalty and knew their weaknesses. I mean, so it goes on that it's a lengthy story there, but if you want to read it, it's in those passages that listed there. You know, we don't hear much about David and his ability to work with the elders of the people during his time, but and then eventually underneath Solomon, they fell underneath the federalship of his work, of the system that, you know, Solomon put in a very detailed set of regimented federal system, and they fell in that process. They counseled some of them, and there's listing of scripture there. And even under Ahab, they cooperated with Jezebel and their work there, which is terrible for them to do that, but they did it. And again, their failure to continue to command them to do to read the law every 7 years to every member of the nation. So they were, and I don't know about you, but it doesn't seem like a whole lot of time, but if we only had access to the scripture every 7 years, that would be a tough thing to do, but it would take them time to read it, and they had to bring that to every person underneath the Jewish influence at that time. We're just so used to having access to the scripture. Prophets condemned the unfaithful elders. It was known to be that way. And Lamentations, you know, records their failures, and then after they returned from exile, we find that that they were involved in the problems of mixed marriages, trying to sort some of that issues out, which was needed, and they were referred to as responsible for building the temple. They were involved in that process, as we see in Ezra. So the eldership had some roles that were set out by God. We can see they were there to enforce the law of Moses. That was one of their first pieces that they were to do there. They were seen as protectors of the innocent, and they were there to protect the sanctity of the land. They were to protect the family structure. They were to protect the purity of the family. They were to protect the rights of the weak, and they were the representative of the congregation in dealing with their collective sins. And they were responsible for teaching the people. So now this is on page 3 underneath in this new piece I sent out under under Roman numeral number 3. Someone look at that list and tell me is there some correlation between that list, those 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 items, and the things that we see in the elder role of the New Testament. Let's talk about that for a minute. I know we haven't talked about elders yet, but we have some ideas as to what that looks like. What do we see some correlation there, man? What things in that list is the same as the list that we have for the elder of the New Testament?
I think it's Highwin. Can I see something?
Sure. That's what I'm looking for. Someone to comment. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I think all of them except letter C. Letter C is protecting the sanctity of the land.
Okay.
And
I would,
We have that. Yeah, we have that as
I mean,
probably.
we have to interpret it, because when it talks about the enforcement of the law, I think it would be a little different. We're not talking about Old Testament law. We're talking about, doing what needs to be done within the church structure. But I don't disagree with you, protecting the innocent. But probably,
Letter C.
yeah,
Letter C.
letter C, protecting the sanctity of the land.
That's the job of the government.
Okay. How about someone else? Someone else got a comment to make? Everybody else seems to be pretty quiet. What about it, folks?
Okay.
They are the one to enforce the law. Under the government is theocracy. They are the one who manage the government. So if that is governed by elder during that time, the elder also has responsible for the boundaries of its territory,
Okay.
including the land. I guess.
So how about, Jovan, how do you, when you look at that list, do you, what Dong just said, he doesn't see number C as pertaining to the elder of the New Testament and the elder of the church today. What do you think? You agree with that, or do you think maybe it could be something a little different?
I think it refers to the land in which the church owned, and what Brother Dong is talking about is the land of the nation.
Okay, all right. I mean, yeah, we could see that in today's, the elder has to care for the physical buildings and things that are involved of the current church. That's true. They do have some responsibilities there.
You should look at it as more land there is more on people,
Yeah.
not only for the physical land, but more on people. That's what I am
Okay.
seeing.
All right. All right. I would agree with that. But I see I see some very primary roles in that. The last one being one, of the elder today, the teaching role is there, and the care of the people. And this is termed in terms of protecting, but if you take all those four of them that are put together as protecting, and to me, I look at those as being shepherding role, because we talk about the elder today having the role of being the shepherd, and that of teaching is what we're going to see that as a primary way of looking at it. And
In this day, for shepherd role,
pardon? Say that
for
again?
you can in this day for shepherd role, elders.
Well, we're talking about elders in today that has a role of being the shepherd of the people. Yes.
Yeah, in this day, in this day.
In this day, today, yes, in the church today.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Let's go on, and we'll pick up. Let's move on with some of the next pieces. It says under 4, it says, so it talks about how may this be background for the elder of the New Testament. So we're going to talk a little bit about that now. Number 1 is there's important. It was a basic unit of society. It was, which would be great if that was still true today, but people today don't see the elders of the church as being a cornerstone of their society. But it would be good if people did, because that's the way God had designed it to be, the cornerstone. It is an official designation, and some choose not to use it that way, but it represents a defined community within the church, just as it did in the day then. And think about it, one of the other roles that's there that we didn't talk about a minute ago is that the decisions were made jointly. In other words, it wasn't one person making a decision within the church body. It was, or within the Jewish body even. It is a joint decision. We never find them working individually. That's the one thing we do not see in the Old Testament, that they worked individually. Neither do we find a place where we find them that there's a chief elder. We've, I don't know, I guess in my current situation at church, there may be one person that kind of leads conversation and brings issues and kind of organizes, but that's where it ends. There's no one that has any more additional, I hate to say it because power sounds bad, but has any additional power than any of the other elders in the group. We all maintain the same role, which I think is what it's meant to be. It shouldn't be that one person does more than the other. Now, and we'll talk more about this about elders, but we may find a situation where someone has a set duties that they take care of that might put them in a position where, at least in that area, they become the person that speaks to it more so than the others. But we'll talk about that.
Wayne.
Yes.
Wayne,
Yes.
I have a reaction here in Chief Elder, because I remember during the time of Jesus, they have the Sanhedrin, and at the same time they have the priest and the chief priest.
Right.
So, how could we identify as the leader of the nation of Israel, the Sanhedrin, the 72 elders, or
Well, I
the
think-
priest?
I think if you look back, the Levites were commanded to have, were the ones that were to bring those priests into their roles, into their, they were the, they weren't given any land. They weren't giving that kind of
Yes.
inheritance. They were given the role of maintaining the house of the Lord. And I think, we don't find, and even in the Old Testament, we find some corruption there. Even think about Eli. Eli allowed his sons to get way out of line before God destroyed them and brought Samuel into being the priest. But I think when it came down into the New Testament, think about it a little bit. Even when we look a little bit at the story of come on. Who was John the Baptist's dad? I'm drawing a blank. Elizabeth was
Zechariah.
Zechariah. Thank you. I know his mom was Elizabeth, but I couldn't get. We find that even there, they had moved it into such a way, and there were so many people involved that he was given just that one time where he could go into the Holy of Holies. And that's where he had received the vision from God about John the Baptist coming. By the time, by that time, guys, the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees were not part of the priestly rule. They were just the leading government. I don't think God had any plans underneath Jewish law. The priests were supposed to rule, and yes, Caiaphas was the chief priest at the time. I get it. All right.
Okay.
But I think when we came to Sanhedrin and in that leading group, I'm not, and I'd have to study it, Dong, to be sure. I'm not sure we can go back and find justification for it in Mosaic law even. It may have been man's interpretation and going outside of the bounds of what God wanted to get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I'd
yeah,
have to go look at it, but
probably.
I don't correlate that at all to. I think they were way outside the bounds of elders, all right, in terms of Jewish leadership elders, all right. I mean, uh, because I guess the way I picture the elders in the Old Testament, there was elders among smaller groups of people, but the Sanhedrin took on that role of being the overall empowering body that oversaw every aspect of Jewish life, and not just
Yeah,
all of them, not just an individual group of elders working with some people. It was everybody they did, and it was obviously corrupt. I mean, if you think about it, part of the corruption that we see and that Jesus fought against was the corruption was how they turned the temple into that den of thieves that he tossed them out twice, once at the beginning of his ministry and once at the end. And part of that was led by the Sanhedrin and that group of people who were looking for the power, and they were making money.
yeah.
Joven, what? Go ahead, Joven.
How can we correlate our topic today in Ephesians 4:11 that the leadership?
Well, you said Ephesians because you kind of were garbled. You said Ephesians 4:11. Is that what you said? Is that correct? Ephesians 4:11.
Yes, sir.
And we'll get there in this study. Some apostles and some prophets and then some elders and some evangelists. So and that's where the rest of this conversation is going to go, is talking about those temporary leaders in the church, which have been your apostles and prophets folks, and then those that were permanent leaders, the evangelists and elders, is where this will go. But we're making that connection that the whole concept of elders, was not something that was, number one, dreamed up for just New Testament Christianity, one. And number two, the people of the day understood so much more than what we do, what an elder was and what they do. They already had that concept built into their thinking process. So one thing about a family is that about the elder too is that, and I'm back on page 3, item D under 4, and it says it had the ability to rule or regulate family. It fit the family from base society. In other words, it was the concept of an elder fits the model that God chose. God chose that the very beginning level of leadership starts in the home and starts with the husband and the father, and moves up from there, and that the eldership role fits well into that model. It can self-exist underneath any kind of other governmental control. In other words, elders can work in any. And I think, let me read the rest of it. I think I agree with you, I think. And that's true. The elders in Israel were recognized even by the government. That's correct. But today they're only recognized by the church. That's true, which is a shame, but that's true today for sure. It can exist even in situations of any situation it needs to. It can self-govern if it needs to, or it can fall up underneath the structure of a government, even if it's a uh, a dictator, communist type group, but an eldership can still work behind the scenes within the lives of the people. And I guess the eldership does some things that honors men. It gives them authority, gives them wisdom, experience, and leadership. Uh, it gives those things, but it requires something from them. It requires that's very true, that they're not Christians. So that's one reason why they're not recognized by Israel or otherwise. It does require a form of respect and uh, uh, requires some honor and respect and dignity that comes from it. But those, but understand in my mind, those come as a part of in other words, people are already doing the work. Even in the Old Testament, the men that were chosen to serve as elders were already respected and honored uh, within their communities. They weren't. They just didn't go out and randomly say, "Well, because you're old," And I don't say that to be negative at all. Those people were already. uh, I guess to summarize, they already had the respect of the community when they became elders. That the people saw that already as being part of that. The other thing was they were all they were all males. There were some good female leaders in the time. Deborah was one. She was a judge. Miriam was the wife of of, uh, Moses. Um, kind of a
Sister of Moses, Miriam.
and what's his wife's name? Miriam. Okay, yeah, you're right. I know what you're talking about now. I got the right person in my mind. What's the wife's name? Dong, I'm trying to remember. I'm getting old.
I forgot too, but Moses' wife is the one who circumcised their kids. That's I remember.
I think Sephora.
Keturah. Jochebed.
Sephora.
Zipporah, yes, that's right. Miriam was, you're right. Miriam was his sister. All right. Okay. All right. So what was so kind of in a nutshell, what was the responsibility of the elder? The elder in the time, now I'm talking about back then in old days, they protected, they had a role of protecting the people. And whether to some degree they had the role of protecting the people from spiritual issues as well as physical protection. The elders were involved, for example, in rebuilding the temple after exile, but they also sanctioned the idea of rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem to protect them. They governed, and that meant they made judgments, calls. They made the decisions. They settled disputes. They governed, but then they also administered. So they were there to make sure that things smoothly moved on. All right. All right. That they administered. They made sure that things ran smoothly, and they kept things moving. And the thing that was unique about them, they had civil, meaning that
Yeah,
civil.
Moses' wife name's Fura.
Yes, his wife's name was Sephora. Miriam was his sister. I had that wrong. So,
Okay.
and they had civil and domestic and religious authority. In other words, they could, again, they could make decisions. You know, and you think about the people that that Moses chose while they were in the wilderness to alleviate his need to sit there and do civil judging. You know, to make, you know, they bring in cases before them. He was there. He gave that over to this group of people to make that judgment. He had domestic, in other words, if there was domestic issues, and they had religious authority. They were there to interpret the law. In terms of that piece, but they were subjected to God's law. In other words, they had the many things that were involved in terms of they interpreted the law and made sure the people fell underneath the authority of God in terms of that law. Looks like Wes is joining us. Good morning, Wes. How are you this morning?
Good. Ready to sleep.
Pardon? You're ready
Ready to sleep.
Ready to sleep. Okay. All right. I'm about done, and then I'm gonna turn it over to you. I'm about there in about 2-3 minutes. All right.
No.
They were considered people of wisdom, and they were associated with their ages in terms of that wisdom. And then they had, and when we talk about this, the elders was in that group of people that were associated with having to educate the people. So the priest had a role, the elder had the role, and the father, the other homes had a role. And with that, anybody have questions for today of me? Because I think I'm pretty much done for the day. That gives me a good breaking point there on page 4. All right.
None so far, sir.
Now, so I think from here, let's, if no one has a question for me, then those of you who are in West class, and the people I had initially in Wes's classes were Luke, Dung, Rochelle, Teo, and Ray. Those 5 people. All right. So if you're not one of those 5, and unless you've communicated with Wes, I would just say go ahead and sign off. All right. So if you're not in, those of you who aren't in Wes's class, then you can just sign off at this point. So we got. So
Wayne,
yes.
Wayne,
Yes, Tom. Go ahead.
do we have a moment?
Yeah, go ahead.
I go back to page 2, in which we talk about the Israelites demand a king,
Right.
and then as if it's the Israelites' fault that demanded a king,
Yes.
and yet God is trying to use this idea of kings, and fast forward, Jesus becomes our King of Kings.
Yes. but he became the
Yeah.
one that was accepted up underneath God's authority to be king. All right, not under they did not want that to. God wanted to stand underneath the leadership of the judges, not to fall up underneath the king at that time in their history, because he knew that eventually the kings would be corrupt. They wouldn't maintain the law. They wouldn't continue in what God wanted them to do. And he knew that eventually those people were going to do exactly what they did. They were going to fall away. But now, obviously, Jesus being the King of Kings is underneath God's plan to be the King of the church at this time. So, does that make sense, Don? Does that help?
Well,
Yeah.
my thought is without the demand of Israelites, David will not be a king, and Solomon will not be a king, which is
Is
the
that
one who built the temple.
at least?
And David's throne is typology of Jesus. The throne of David, and Jesus
Well, then,
is
it would have been.
yeah.
We don't know how the word would have been written at that point if the Israelites had stayed with judges. We don't know exactly how that would have fallen.
Yeah, just a thought. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anyone else got questions? All
I have a
right,
chat, sir.
go ahead. You got a chat?
Yeah.
Lute, I tell you, we already have Wayne King. I got it. I can't. I'm all right. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Christ will make us king so that he will be the King of Kings. And you are already here.
And
King.
I am a king. That's right. But can you just send me my crown, Luke? I just don't have my crown yet.
The gray hair is the crown of man.
Okay. So I think
The righteous man is the gray hair.
I don't have much gray hair though yet. So I'm still working on it.
Sir Teo,